Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's just about to go live. I'm very excited tonight. But just before we do, we have just a few more minutes to go. So please, if you would be patient, we will appreciate it. I can see there are about 40 people on the call. That's quite exciting. Quite a few people are still live on YouTube. So this promises to be quite an event. We'll be starting very soon. So please do enjoy the music and get ready to have a wonderful time tonight. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That is if you are in Nigeria. But if you're part of our host community here in Southeast Asia, then it is a very good evening to you. Welcome to the 61st NIAC webinar. It is quite exciting that Nigeria is turning 61 and we get to celebrate it online with our community in Nigeria and of course, with our community here in Brunei as well. Now, this event promises to be quite an interesting one tonight, judging from all the special guests that we have lined up, starting with our keynote speaker, Mr. Babs Omotowa, who's the former MD for NLNG, together with a panel of amazing people. You will get to meet them much later in the event and of course hear more about them. It promises to be quite an intellectual discourse. Now, my name is Karachi Atia, and it is my singular honor to guide us through the first part of this event. If you're joining us from YouTube, you're welcome. If you're on Facebook Live, you're welcome. And if you're sitting pretty with us here on Zoom, it is an honor to have you. Thank you for making time out to join us tonight. Our topic is a very interesting and important one. It's Nigeria, oil and gas industry, and the energy transition conundrum. I can't wait to dig into it, but as is our custom here, we will start with the HSSE and webinar rules. So please do pay attention to your surroundings and identify the nearest escape to you in the event of an emergency. Stay focused, try not to multitask and do too many things. This session will be recorded. If you're joining us on Zoom, I'm sure you would already have received a prompt where you have to say it's okay for it to be recorded. And if you would like to ask questions later on in the webinar, maybe over the course of when our special guest, Mr. Babs Omotowa, is speaking. There, no, we know. So she didn't wish to ask a question. Please do not put it in the chat room because it will get lost in all the other chats that comes in between. There is a question and answer portal right at the bottom of your screen. Put your questions in there and we'll try our best to take as much as we can. And if you would like to ask a question live during this event, you can just simply raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And when you're called upon to speak, please unmute your microphone, introduce yourself with name and location, and then please proceed to ask your question. Speak softly if you are in an open space. And of course, as is our custom, be respectful always. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to that part where we need to honor both our home country and the country that we belong to. But just before we do that, we want to run through the program just so that you have an idea of the table that has been set before you today. So we'll start off, of course, with the introduction, HSSE and agenda, and of course the webinar rules, which we have just done. And immediately after now, there will be the Nigerian and the Bruneian national anthem. And we'll be welcoming you all, our Nigerian president here in Panaga. We'll be welcoming everybody with a welcome remark. And soon after that, we're going to go to the opening remark by the country chair. And then we'll have a remark by the Nigerian High Commissioner, followed closely by the introduction of a keynote speaker, whom I've already mentioned today, so I'm sure you all know. And then we have the keynote speech. Then we have an introduction to the panelists. There will be a panel session tonight, and it's quite an interesting, range, interesting people sitting there discussing interesting things. And this is where you can also ask questions both after the keynote speech and after the panel discussion. Then we will have a remarks by the MD NLNG. Before we go to your questions that you have put in the question and answer chat box, we'll take a picture and then we'll go straight to the vote of thanks. So it's quite a compact program. Please don't go anywhere. I'm sure you will enjoy it. And so now we'll move on to the very next thing, which is the Nigerian and the Bruneian national anthem. If you know the words of the Bruneian national anthem, feel free to sing along. Otherwise, just sit back and enjoy the music. I bet we all know the words of the Nigerian anthem, and so I invite you all to sing along. Immediately after this, I will not be back. We'll go straight into the welcome speech by the Nigerian, the chairman right here in Nigeria, our Panagan Nigerian chairman, which is Mike Ikebudu. First of all, the Nigerian national anthem.
All rise, all compatriots, Nigerians come on men to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes was join them on in the land.
Please confirm you can hear me. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellency, the Nigerian High Commissioner to Malaysia and Brunei, Dr. Hajara Ibrahim Salim, the country chair, the share companies in Nigeria, and MD Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, Mr. Osage Okumbo, the MD of Nigeria LNG, Dr. Philip Mishebila, and our keynote speaker for today, 2021 Nigeria Independence Anniversary Celebration NIAC webinar, and former MD of Nigeria LNG, Mr. Babs Omotawa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm immensely appreciative of your attendance and presence at the first ever NIAC webinar being organized by the Nigerian section of the BSP, Panaga Club, and also on behalf of the Nigerian community living in Brunei. I would like to first thank Her Excellency once again for the immense support we enjoy from the High Commission in Malaysia. I think it's been a very wonderful relationship. In our first formal session with Her Excellency, she assured us of her continued support for Nigerian community in Brunei. And we really look forward to her visit to Brunei as soon as the current COVID lockdown is over. We are looking really forward to see you. Thank you, Ma, for all the support. I would like to just take a few minutes to talk about the Nigerian community in Brunei here. I think it's fair to say that Nigeria and Brunei has had decades of history, mainly driven by the common interests in the development of oil and gas resources. And the shale companies in Nigeria through the platform of the RDS JVs has been in the forefront of deploying people capability from Nigeria to Brunei. I think it's been a wonderful relationship that benefited both countries and then all the companies that are involved in that. We have about 20 families today currently in Brunei, and that's made up of about 150 people. This includes women, children, and men as well. We are mainly located in the cities of Banda and Kebi. So for those of us working in the oil and gas industry, we are mainly in the Syria, which is part of a Kebi district. And then for other Nigerians who are working here, we have them mostly in the education industry in Banda. We also have some of us working in the hospitality industry. We have some of us working in the business like books. If you go to the international airport in Banda, the biggest bookshop there is actually owned by a Nigerian. So we are in kind of different parts of the economy, and we are doing quite well, I would say. It's also good to say that the community here remains highly respected by Bruneians as a result of the competence and strength of character that we have demonstrated. And I will say that even within the government circles, the legacy of previous Nigerians who had worked here in the past remains very, very strong in the memory of the government officials. It's good to note that the country chair of share companies in Nigeria, Mr. Osage Okumbo, has worked in Brunei. And it gladdens my heart that each time I go to government, the Petroleum Authority or Ministry of Energy for meetings, the Minister of Energy will always ask me about Osage, send my greetings to him. And at one time, he actually asked me to give him his number. So that kind of tells you the kind of impact our people have made here in Brunei. So I would like to just reiterate that we as a community will continue to work together with the support of the High Commission to continue to fly Nigerian flag really, really high here in Brunei. And once again, I would like to welcome every one of you to our webinar today. And I wish us a very, very fruitful deliberation. At this point, I would like to invite the country chair, share companies in Nigeria, Mr. Sage, to give a short opening remark or goodwill message, and also welcome the ambassador. This will be followed by a few remarks and goodwill message from Her Excellency as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mike, can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm trying to make sure you can see me as well. That seems to be.
Okay, let me check. Yes, I can see
you. You can see me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike, for your kind words. Your Excellency, the ambassador to the Netherlands with oversight for Brunei, Dr. Hajara Ibrahim Salim, my distinguished chairman of the Nigerian community there, other distinguished panelists, both the current MD of Nigerian LNG and the past MD, my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am quite delighted to be celebrating this Nigeria's 61st independence anniversary with the Nigerian community, the Panaga Club in Brunei. As Mike just said, this is sort of homecoming for me. As many of you will know, I spent about 5 of my most incredibly impactful years on international assignments in the Kingdom of Brunei. And I still have very fond memories of my stay in Syria and in the Panaga camp. Those were some of my formative years in the company. And those are years that, without a doubt, prepared me for the current role I hold as country chair and MD of SPDC, our country's leading energy company. So I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this 61st anniversary celebrations of our nation, Nigeria. You may be some distance from home, from our country, Nigeria, but your impact and contribution to the development of Nigeria can be felt far and near. And it should be so felt because it is much needed. I heard Mike talk about the big bookshop at the Brunei International Airport. When I was there, apart from a strong Nigerian community in Brunei Shell, some of the best doctors we had at the Geraldton Hospital, top-class, world-class doctors, were also Nigerian. I have no doubt that Nigerians continue to play a very important role. And it's, of course, gladdening that they enjoy a special welcome in Brunei. I certainly remember Dr. Matsuni very fondly as my boss at the time. I'm glad to know that he's now the Minister for Energy in Brunei. He was also quite supportive of ourselves and Nigerians. I do remember indeed when a group from the National Assembly, shortly after we attained independence, returned to democracy in 1999, visited, and Dr. Matsuni, then as the Deputy Managing Director, hosted them to an impressive welcoming ceremony in his house. So he's always been a good friend of Nigeria, and I'm quite pleased to see that he's today the Energy Minister for this great kingdom. I also wish to use this opportunity to both welcome to this event and congratulate Dr. Hajara Ibrahim Salim on her appointment as the High Commissioner to Malaysia, by extension the Kingdom of Brunei. As we all know, she's a consummate public administrator by excellence, having served Nigeria at various levels, including in our National Assembly. Madam High Commissioner, your appointment, which happened at Nigeria and the world battle to contain the impact and spread of COVID-19 pandemic, is a welcome one. I certainly hear all the good things you are doing, and thank you for your continued support and that of the High Commission that you continue to render to Nigerians working and living in the Kingdom of Brunei. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate Nigeria 61 with the theme, Moving Forward Towards Greatness, I am reminded of the popular saying, put your money where your mouth is. This wisdom aims at getting us to make concrete effort, in this case, towards moving our country towards greatness. Our country does indeed need movement. We need to collectively support the government to safeguard lives and property, for investment purposes to preserve the sanctity of our contracts, without which business decisions and investments with longer term value cannot be made. And in so doing, create an environment that is conducive for doing business, because this creates employment opportunities and revenue for our people. We also need an environment that supports innovation amongst our people, especially the young ones, and enables them to acquire skills and technology that result in strategies that help us to take advantage of global opportunities as they inevitably arise. To be a shame, of course, and a big waste if our country, if as a country we do not utilize these times to set our economy on foundations that have proven over time in other nations to be the fulcrum of economic and social advancement. Despite these known challenges, however, I believe that one of the most impactful resources Nigeria has, as we all agree, are its people. As a company, this has remained very clear to us, and we have been unwavering in our support in the development of talented Nigerians, particularly in our industry. Our companies here, with the SPDC JV and the deep offshore companies, NEPCO, through the years have offered thousands of Nigerian children, mainly from poor families across both the Delta and the rest of the country, the opportunity to achieve quality education at no cost to them. These children grow up and in turn pay it forward for our country. Always remain extremely proud when I run into some of the brightest brains of the country who tell me that they were products of the Shell Scholarship Program. So despite the challenges our country is facing presently, I'm keeping hope alive, as I know you all are, in the great potential of the Nigerian people, both at home and in diaspora, like yourselves in Brunei, to turn things around for our country. The topic for today's webinar, which focuses on Nigerian oil and gas industry and the energy transition conundrum, is one that is at front burner of energy conversations, both in Nigeria and globally. The world is looking forward towards cleaner energy with little or no greenhouse emission, and Nigeria is also on this journey. As you know, we're a key player in natural gas, and natural gas emits somewhere between 45 and 55% fewer greenhouse gas emissions and less than 1/10 of air polluters than coal when used to generate electricity. As you know, Nigeria is abundantly blessed with natural gas. Considering this, in 2020, Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, on behalf of the federal government, introduced the National Gas Expansion Program and declared 2020 the year of gas, and then the start of a decade of gas. This affords us the opportunity to see the country utilize its vast natural gas resources. The SPDC today therefore aims to produce more natural gas, some of which was once flared, but is now gathered for domestic power supply generation. The shell companies in Nigeria are also working with the federal government of Nigeria to build a network of gas plants and pipelines to help bring power to the country's growing industrial and commercial sectors. This infrastructure will also increase the export of liquefied natural gas to meet global demands for power and heating. Our Asa North or Haji South gas development project in Imo State, for example, is under construction and is expected to be one of the largest gas facilities in Nigeria. Traders at the famous area market in Apa, who had traditionally used petrol and diesel generators to power their light and equipment, now have Shell Nigerian Gas SNG supplying natural gas to area Market Solutions Limited, the independent power project consortium that provides electricity to the markets. One of those areas I'm extremely proud of. This helps to generate electricity for about 37,000 shops and an estimated 1 million traders. Over the past 5 years, Shell Nigeria Gas has quickly grown to supply Nigeria's largest industrial hubs with 120 existing commercial and industrial customers and an additional 30 with which it has signed agreements. Shell Gas BV and its partners also at the end of 2019 took an FID, a final investment decision, on a new LNG processing unit that we all know as Train 7 at the Nigerian LNG. This expansion will create about 12,000 jobs during construction and stimulate growth of the local oil and gas services sector. We also believe in increasing access to energy for Nigerians and have therefore provided funding to Olon, as you have all heard of, a non-for-profit enterprise that finances renewable energy startups in Nigeria so that they can provide energy to communities that are off the power grid. Already, Olon has invested in 30 off-grid energy companies, leading to thousands of connections for low-income households and businesses. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, you must by now have realized that I'm immensely proud of what we do as Shell companies in Nigeria. Our impact is felt in so many important aspects of our economy and the lives of our people. And we are powering progress in the oil and gas industry, in addition to supporting the energy transition to cleaner energy sources. There's no doubt still a lot to be done in our country, Nigeria. The scale of the opportunity is only mirrored by the scale of challenges, and we all have a role to play. Your Excellency, once again, I want to thank you for being with us for this celebration of Nigeria at 61. I congratulate you once more on behalf of the Shell companies in Nigeria and indeed of all Nigerians who are in diaspora, like our colleagues in Brunei. We congratulate you once again on your appointment as a High Commissioner. Let me also congratulate the Nigerian community section of the Panaga Club, Brunei, for putting this event together. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can just give a virtual round of applause for our very own country chair, when he said that one of the things that Nigerians have in which we should be proud of is her people. I think we're very proud that we have him as one of us. Thank you so much, Mr. Osage, and thank you very much for that speech. Now we move on to the very next part of this program. While we're still waiting for the High Commissioner to join us, we will be introducing and reading the profile of our keynote speaker in the person of Babs Omotoa. I have the singular pleasure of doing that tonight. Mr. Babs Omotoa is currently the chairman of the advisory board Montserrado BV and independent director of Pearl Hill Technologies, USA. He was previously a member of Shell's global upstream leadership team across 46 countries, former MD of NLNG and global president of 100,000 members UK Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. A consummate global leader in upstream and midstream oil and gas industry with an extensive executive C-suite and non-executive board career across several continents in multi-billion-dollar businesses in established and emerging energy sectors. He's a proven strategist, a visionary with big picture mindsets and impactful delivery of strategic, commercial, and cultural turnaround, such as 65% increased revenue to $40 billion, NIAT of $15 billion, 70% rise in returns, and raising $2 billion international financing during his tenure as the NLNG CEO. A nationalist with a development mindset, including building engineering laboratory in 6 Nigerian universities, the 25-year Bonny development plan with a 75 billion naira commitment, the Bonny-Bodo Road completion with 60 billion naira support, leveraging construction of 6 ships to train 600 Nigerians and export made in Nigeria goods, just to mention but a few. His core values remain integrity, courage, and reliability. He is married, ladies and gentlemen, and he's a proud father of 3 children. Please, can you all join me tonight as we make welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Babs Omotoa.
Thank you very much, Karachi. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
All right. Your Excellency, the High Commissioner, Dr. Ibrahim Salim, and the distinguished panelists, including the country chair of Shell in Nigeria, Osagi Okumbo, as well as the new managing director for Nigeria LNG, Philip, and also the Panaga Club and Nigerians in Brunei, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure for me to join in the 61st independence celebration, and especially with the Brunei family. In my last job in Shell, Brunei was one of the last countries that I visited before I took a retirement from Shell. So I have extremely fond memories of Brunei. I will be talking on the topic of the celebration in terms of Nigeria, oil and gas, and the energy transition. And I will indeed make my presentation on those 3 themes. I will talk a little bit about Nigeria. I will talk about how oil and gas fits into that picture, and talk about the energy transition, and also talk about the role that government and we as individuals and professionals have within that space. I think Nigeria will, of course, be one that we describe as a giant of Africa. I think I will ask Ismail to share the slides that I sent earlier. I can't seem to be able to share from here, but while he's doing that, I will give you some of the highlights. As I mentioned, Nigeria is a giant of Africa, and you can see that size not just in video from here, but while he's doing that, give you some of the highlights. As I mentioned, Nigeria is a giant of Africa, and you can see that size not just in video from here, but while. All right, I seem to be getting an echo back. Karachi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you very well, sir.
Okay, it seems to be some echo. All right, I was stating that Nigeria, of course, is the giant of Africa. We're not just a giant because of our population. We're the largest Black nation in the world, most of whom are predominantly youth. But also we are blessed with not just a huge landmass, very good for agriculture, good weather. We are also blessed with natural resources, oil and gas, and other minerals. And today we have the biggest GDP in Africa, over $375 billion. And diasporas, including many of you on the line, contribute over 20 billion in diaspora remittances to Nigeria, some of the highest contribution in most countries across the world. But the country does have the potential to be a world giant. I think projections by many of the rating agencies indicate that Nigeria's GDP could grow to about 4.5 trillion by the year 2050, with the potential that the country has. We are, of course, bedeviled by challenges, including poverty. Over 49% of Nigerians live below the poverty line. Illiteracy. Over 38% of Nigerians are still without good education. every time we talk about Nigeria, I always say that you can look at Nigeria as a phoenix that is about to emerge, despite its challenges. And what Nigeria needs are what I call dreamers of a certain kind, people who can dream of the future, a future better than the present, people who are nation builders, who can see the strength in our diversity, people who can see through the challenges we have today, and can bring together people, bring together talents, and be able to unleash the potential that Nigeria has. And when we talk about Nigeria and through the presentations that we make, I will hope you would put that in mind and think about yourself in those contexts. How can you be a dreamer of that certain kind? How can you be a nation builder? How can you pull talents together and make a difference in areas that you can talk about? It's usually common in discussions around Nigeria that many talk about Nigeria more from the challenges that Nigeria has than from the successes. So, but I usually like to start, from the successes of Nigeria, because if you continue to talk only from the challenges, you might find yourself in a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you can easily demoralize yourself. So there are a few successes in Nigeria. I think, of course, I will start by mentioning the Nigeria LNG, of course, when I talk about industries and successes. It's the largest industrial plant in sub-Saharan Africa, the fourth largest global LNG in the world. It's been producing for over 21 years with significant world-class performance. And I think it's a pride to Nigeria. It shows what Nigeria is capable of doing when we get all our acts together. But you also have the largest refineries being built by Dangote Refinery, and the cement industry in Nigeria is really leading in Africa and continuing to have footprints in other African countries. When you look at digital, we're really growing. We have now IPOs that are topping over $1 billion with FlutterWave, and some of our banks are the biggest in Africa and also have footprints across Africa. Our telecoms is again the biggest in Africa, over 100 million lines, and is enabling significant e-commerce across the country. And we're starting to see real growth in our services across the country, and the contribution of services has been enabled by telecom. So many small businesses, MSEs, SMEs are growing based on these capabilities that we have in the country. Our infrastructure are starting to see some attention. The rail lines from Abuja to Kaduna, Lagos, Ibadan, the Warri-Takwe lines are starting to make a difference. We're seeing some construction on roads, Second Niger Bridge. We're seeing marine capabilities improved with the deep blue interagency security. And when you look at the entertainment industry, we are leading in Africa, not just in the cinema of Nollywood, but in the music industry as well. Our brands are becoming global, and we're really making inroads into the global film industry, even across Netflix. So huge successes in many parts of Nigeria that we should be proud of, and we should think about that. There's always what is described sometimes as change blindness, that sometimes we are blind to the changes happening around us. We are consumed by the bigger events that occur, and sometimes fail to see those changes that are really happening around us. But we do have challenges, and we must acknowledge them. And one of them, of course, is security. I think this is one that has bedeviled Nigeria in the last decade or so. We are now ranked among the top 3 in terms of terrorism, with Boko Haram really impacting our Northeast. We also have issues of kidnapping, of banditry that's affecting movement across the country, impacting the confidence of investors, and the ease of doing business in the country is being affected by the challenges. All of this is impacting development, and sadly also diverting expenditure that should have gone into education, into health, into infrastructure is being diverted to fight this war. We must give a lot of recognition and appreciation to our men in uniform who have continued to confront this challenge that's a bit new for conventional warfare. This is unconventional warfare, and many of them have sacrificed their lives so that we can all be safe. So we do owe a lot of appreciation to our men in uniform for the work they are doing. And hopefully we will all overcome these challenges as we work together in the country. We also do have other challenges. Infrastructure is another challenge that we have as a country in power. Most of us are aware that our distribution is below 5 gigawatts a day, and the demand in the country probably exceeds 15 gigawatts, and most of that are being generated from individual power generation. There is some work ongoing by Siemens with the Nigerian government and the German government, and hopefully we start to see some progress over time in this key sector. On roads, we also have huge challenges, dilapidated roads, and also efforts ongoing in constructing some road projects across the country. Same for rail. We're also seeing some progress. But these challenges, I think, provide what Moody describes as 3 trillion gap in our opportunities as a country, and an attention and focus to addressing these challenges will indeed help the country to leapfrog. So indeed, another challenge for the country. And I think another challenge you can think about in terms of the country is also in a budget challenge, a financial challenge. If you look at our budgets over the last few years, you will realize that we do have significant deficits in our budget. Revenue has not met up with our expenditure growth. And every year in the last 5 years, we have continued to need to borrow to be able to fund our budgets. And this has meant that we are now starting to spend more than 90% of our revenue to service debt, and which means that we continue to have to borrow to be able to execute capital projects and to be able to even meet some of our debt repayment as we go along. This remains a big challenge for the government, and is impacted, of course, both with the oil price when it's down as it was in recent times, but also the fact that, as you see in the next slide on our trade balances, we are also not exporting enough to be able to earn revenue and foreign exchange adequate to meet our demand. Our net trade balances are deficits, and we are importing more than we are exporting. And no wonder you see the challenges we see on our exchange rates because of the pressure that is coming from this imbalance. What is of bigger challenge is, of course, that we are exporting largely raw materials, such as crude oil, and we are importing largely finished products. This in itself creates a gap that we have an opportunity to add more in-country value to our raw materials, and opportunities in our to grow our medium and small scale enterprises, to create wealth, to create jobs, and to reduce the forex demand as another area. And so when you look at these challenges, you can also look at them from our GDP. So what does that mean in terms of GDP? And that's where we start to come into the oil and gas industry. When you look at the GDP in the country, you will realize that the 3 main sectors that contribute to our GDP are services, agriculture, and industries. Services account for more than half of our GDP, whilst industry and agriculture account for the other half. But when you look at the contribution of the oil and gas industry to the GDP, whilst the oil and gas contributes more than 80% of forex and 55% of revenue, you actually see that our contribution to GDP from oil and gas is less than 10%. And also the industries in the GDP that should have been enabled by the oil and gas is only contributing 23% of GDP, which highlights that we, as an industry, we have not leveraged the spend, the income, and the capacity that the industry have, we have not leveraged it enough to create industries and create jobs. And this is definitely an area that we really need to do a lot more about. So, that takes us then into the oil industry. So what's the situation in the oil industry? Why do we have this situation whereby we huge revenue and a huge forex, and yet we are not contributing significantly to enable the growth of the country in terms of GDP? We are not enabling industries to grow. Our profile of the oil and gas industry shows that we're in the top 10 of the world's oil and gas reserves. When you look in the oil side, we have over 37 billion barrels reserves. And in the gas side, we have more than 200 TCF proven gas reserves, and we have over 600 TCF unproven gas reserves. So we are a country that's been blessed with oil and gas, and we have had the opportunity to be able to earn revenue. As I mentioned, oil prices have fluctuated over time, and this in itself has affected our contribution in terms of revenue. There are years in which we contribute quite a lot when the oil price is high, and there are periods where we don't contribute enough. But I think the bigger challenge for us as an industry is how well we leverage the oil and gas industry to create value in terms of in-country value, in terms of in-country capacity, in terms of enabling other industries to grow, because we are not a big employer of people, but if we enable other industries that support our operation, be it steel, engineering, construction, those capacities in country manufacturing of goods and provision of services, we will be able to make a difference in the country much more than we are making today. So what has been the story in oil, gas, and upstream, midstream, and downstream? I think in the upstream, of course, we discovered oil since the 50s, with Olebiri being one of the first places we started producing commercially, and we've grown production from those early days to periods around the 2004 era where we were producing over 2.5 million barrels a day. Unfortunately, today we produce probably in the region of 1.6 million barrels a day, despite that our aspiration as a country is to have been producing 4 million barrels a day. And we do have the Nigerian Content Act that was passed in 2010, and a lot of effort going to develop indigenous companies in the oil and gas sector. And we're seeing more of those indigenous companies taking possession of several assets, and the IOC is gradually exiting. I think we've had announcements even from Shell that they might be exiting from the onshore SPDC side of the business, while continuing, of course, to still be in the offshore side of the business and investments in NLNG. But the entrance of the indigenous also come at a time when we are challenged, especially with the energy transition. So again, we're punching below our weight in terms of what we should have been producing from oil, and we have not reached our potential. If you look at midstream, not only have we not done enough in terms of the LNG, we had started LNG in 1989, and production started in 1999. We should have had Train 7 many years ago, but thank God it's now in progress, and I'm sure Philip will be excited to have the opportunity to take this further and hopefully be able to drive even for more projects, Train 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The dream of the founders of LNG and NLNG was to have 12 trains, and hopefully we'll still continue to make progress. But other projects like LNG Brass have not made the kind of progress we would have wished they had made. So we're still today at 6 trains, 23 million tons. The 7th will take us to over 30 million tons. But the aspiration, as I mentioned, was to have had 12 trains, 50 million tons. So again, we're punching way below our weight. But also, we're still having flaring over 800 million scf a day, and we're not contributing enough towards the power solutions that the country needs. A lot of the domestic supply obligations have not been met, not just because of us as an industry, but of course we are part of the overall challenge that has not enabled the power plants that should rely on gas to have reach the potential the country could have reached. Downstream also challenged. The refineries started in 65, 4 refineries in Port Harcourt, in Warri, in Kaduna. Sadly, in the last few years, many of the refineries, if not all, have not been able to produce any significant volumes of produced products. And as a result, over 90% of petroleum products are imported, and the government is spending probably 2 trillion naira every year in subsidies for a country that has a huge deficit in our budget between revenue and expenditure. This is an expenditure that we didn't need to be spending. So hopefully with Dangote refinery coming through, and with the efforts in the Nigerian refineries to rehabilitate them have come true, we will hope to see us exporting rather than importing and spending so much money on subsidies. There have been reasons for a lot of the challenges. As I said, we're punching way below our weight in terms of what we should be doing as an industry. Funding has been a challenge. Security has been a challenge. The uncertainty of PIB has been a challenge. Unfortunately, investors are starting to put their money elsewhere in Africa, elsewhere across the world. And we've also had challenges of politics playing into our mix. So as an industry, we're definitely punching below our weight in terms of what we should be contributing, both in terms of revenue, in terms of enabling power, in terms of enabling other industries. We have a lot more room to make more difference than we are making today. And so, you start then to think, what are other countries, what have they done? And Qatar is a good example that you can look at. A smaller country, and some may argue it's not a like for like, but some of the key points is that they started their own LNG industry similar to the same time we started. They started in 1997, their first cargo. Our first cargo was in 1999, 2 years after. They are now in 14 trains, 77 million tons per annum. You can compare that with our own 6 trains and 23 million tons per annum. And they're also planning to add an additional 30 million tons per annum by 2026. We are planning to add about 7 million tons in that same sort of window. But more importantly, they've leveraged the gas industry to really develop. Ras Laffan is an example of where they've developed significant LNG, GTL, petrochemical power, and they've really been able to develop industries to the point where 55% of their own GDP comes from industries, unlike us, which we only have 23%. So they've been able to use their gas industry not just to grow and generate revenue, which we haven't, but they've used it to leverage other industries. And that is accounting for a huge part of their GDP. And you can see their GDP per capita of 94,000 as against our own $1,900 GDP per capita. So, it's just an example to think about what other countries have been able to do and what we may be able to do. The challenge, of course, for us, I think, is as you think through this conundrum in terms of our industry, is also that the energy transition is happening at the same time, which means that oil and gas is not the favorite. The world is working hard towards the energy transition, and there's a lot of effort to move away from hydrocarbons, be it coal, be it oil, and gas. Of course, gas is a transition fuel, as we all know. But I think the challenge is that, we will see lower oil demand from developed countries going forward. There will still be demand for gas over the years to come. But, the oil demand will grow less and less, and alternatives will grow in developed world countries. Many of them have set net zero dates, 2040, for example, in the EU. And I think China just set its own net zero as well, I think 2060. So countries are setting dates for which they hope to not have energy emissions in their economy. I don't necessarily think this means that there should be no oil or gas. I think our challenge as an industry is how do we produce oil and gas without emitting CO2? That I think is a challenge. CCS has been one of the options we've looked at, but I think we can make oil and gas not just be a transition fuel. We can make it part of the solution if we can find solutions to removing CO2. So oil and gas are not the problem, it's the emissions that are the problem. But the developing countries are then reducing their investments in hydrocarbon. So many banks, many international banks, many countries are not putting money again in hydrocarbons. I think the report from the IAE recently said that the world can move to net zero without any more investment in hydrocarbon. So you're really seeing a movement that is really challenging any investments going into hydrocarbon, which is a big challenge for us in developing countries because, of course, whilst it is true that we may not be able to export more oil, especially in the future, if we do not find solutions such as CCS, but we will still use oil for a lot of domestic use for many decades to come. So, still no doubt that our own infrastructure are not yet built to support some of the new energies. And as a result, we will still need oil and gas for a lot of years to come. But people will always need to remember that gas is also needed, not just for power, but for petrochemicals. So many people think of oil and gas in transportation, but we forget that gas is fuel for petrochemicals. And most of our daily lives, be it your houses, be it cement or aluminium or your clothes, most things that are in our houses, they all have oil and gas component or hydrocarbon components in them. So it's still many, many years for oil and gas, and we developing nations need to continue to do that. But we will require investment, and our challenge is that if the Western world are not investing in hydrocarbons, how do we raise those capital to be able to, drive new energies, drive our oil and gas going forward? Clearly, we have just passed the PIB, an excellent achievement for this administration. It's a bill that has been in the works for over 21 years. So it's excellent to see that we finally passed the PIB, which will provide some certainty and has some incentives to really help move the industry forward. But I think we also need to already be working on an EIB, which is about the energy industry bill, which should start to develop clearer vision, clearer roadmaps, clearer fiscal, clearer incentives, not just for the oil and gas, but also for the new energies that we will, as a country, need to develop going forward. But huge opportunities for us as a country. We do have the opportunity of the luxury of not just having oil and gas resource, but we do have a lot of the natural energies as well, be it in solar, wind, and hydro opportunities. So we do have opportunities to be a player even beyond oil and gas. And so as I start to round up gradually, I think, so what does this mean then, and how do we make a difference? And how do we make a difference both from the government side, but also how do we make a difference for us as individuals? As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation about dreamers of a certain kind, I hope as I've been sharing some of these, I hope thoughts in your mind are not about pointing fingers at government or pointing fingers at others. I hope what's in your mind is how can you be part of making a difference? That's, I think, what differentiates winners from those who don't win, is those who think positively rather than thinking negatively, those who think about how they can make a difference rather than thinking of how others are not making a difference. But I think in terms of the government, the government has 3 priorities. I think they were set from 2015. They are the right priorities: security, economy, and corruption. And I think government has been working extremely hard on those issues with varying levels of success. But I think no one can fault their efforts in the direction of those 3 areas. We can say security has become more complex, but the amount of our Nigerian forces that have sacrificed their life, the amount of money the government has voted, the attention the president and governors have put to it, I think is to be appreciated, even if the situation on ground hasn't reached the level we are. But we all have a role to play. We all have intelligence, as Nigerians, that we must provide, and we must be able to support our security forces in driving out a lot of these, negative forces from our country. The economy, a lot of work, I think, needs to continue on the economy. It's difficult, especially when we are having to borrow quite a lot. We're not producing enough to export, and as a result, our exchange rate, I think, has fluctuated for many, many years. I think, by 1999, Naira was exchanging for only 22 Naira. And, it's deteriorated significantly. But that's mainly because we're not producing as much as we can. And that's leading to a lot of challenges. So, focus by the government on those three priorities, I think, are the right ones. And progress, I think, is being made. Attracting foreign investment, I think, is very important, not just to close the gap in our trade imbalances, but to be able to enable us to really develop our GDP, to create more employment opportunities, to drive businesses and industries in the country. We really need to have foreign investments. And as I mentioned, the EIB will be important going forward. So I think, diversification from oil and gas, fast-tracking our efforts in security and infrastructure, improving our human capacity, I think is very important. We are in a fourth industrial revolution already, where digital is playing a bigger role, and where knowledge is a lot different from what it used to be historically, and the ability to connect data, to bring new insights, and to use different tools in the digital age, artificial intelligence, robotics, to be able to really fast track our development, I think creates a huge opportunity. When I think of what digital brings, I remember also what telecommunication brought for us in Nigeria. If I think of how the GSMs and the telecoms have enabled industries to be created, e-commerce to thrive, banking industries to really transform, it enabled us to leapfrog from where we used to be before we had that telecom revolution. I think that's what I see the fourth industrial revolution also brings for Nigeria, is the opportunity to really leapfrog from where we are now to where most of the Western developed countries are, using those capabilities that exist. But this requires a different focus for us on our human capacity, the ability to develop not just a traditional way of regurgitating and memorizing, but more of how we develop capacities that can enable us to really be productive as individuals. So I think this will be a few things on the government side, but for us as individuals, I would offer the following as my suggestions to us as individuals. One, we must continue to develop our skills. More than ever before. Skills development had always been important, be it your technical skills or your non-technical skills. But I think the future is going to be more about multi-skilling. So, not just in your technical area, but digital, entrepreneurial, new energies. Just to give an example, if you're a civil engineer and you think about, construction of houses or construction of, oil field facilities, if you continue to go into the future thinking of it the same way as we used to in the past, you miss the opportunity of what digitalization is bringing into your industry. For example, estates have been printed by 3D printing in China within weeks. So within 3 weeks, they've printed estate of over 50 houses with totally different way of working. And as a result, you can see as this develops that civil engineering will be totally different from what it was in the past. It wouldn't be about the way we look at construction. It will be in a different way. If you're a medical doctor, medicine is totally different now with artificial intelligence. Robots are able to do operations even much better than human beings can do. And artificial intelligence is enabling us to connect data of people in a way in which we can anticipate illnesses and prevent them before they even happen. So if you just remain in your field, without looking at some of these new skills, I think you'll be left behind very, very quickly. So I will encourage, if you're not already, that you continue to multi-skill and that you continue to think not of how things have been done in the past, but the opportunities by combining different skill sets. We have to be actively involved, I think, not just in private sector, but also in the public sector. I think many of us shy away from any involvement in public sector, but we miss the point that the public sector is what develops the country a lot more than the private sector. And so how do we contribute? So you might say, I'm not in the public service employment, but even if you think about bills being passed in the National Assembly, there's always opportunity for public hearing. There's opportunity to submit proposals. How much of that are we doing? And can you do more in terms of articulating in your own area what you see as best practices? Some of you in Brunei or in other parts of the world, you see best practices in some areas. How do you put that together, analyze our situation in the country, develop a roadmap, and be able to make these sort of suggestions to public sector players so they may look at it and see whether we can leapfrog. I would also say you need to think of yourself as the change. Sometimes we're always thinking about other people as the change, but I ask, in your own community, in your own area of influence, how can you be part of the change process? How can you be driving the change? If we can all be the change that we're looking for in the country, if we can be that change in our own community, if we can be that change in the area of our influence, I think the country will already be in a much, much better place. Many a times we point to people in government and we talk about them not having developed their area. We talk about them in terms of corruption. I think we must always ask ourselves, how have we done in our own area? Are we much better? Are we a good example? And I think, when you think about things like leveraging the industry that I described earlier, how have you used the area in which you manage? How have you used that to help society to develop? How have you used your influence to bring foreign investments into Nigeria, to develop capacity in the country, and to be able to help the country grow? Don't think about it just of what government will do. Think about it also about what can you do and make a difference. But I also think we need a positive mindset as a country. In many conversations with Nigeria, we quickly move into all the negatives. Security is a problem, infrastructure is a problem. We all discuss the negatives in such a way that we become underwhelmed ourselves. If we're so negative and discuss issues so negatively, why will anyone want to invest in your country? And we need to always remember that it is the way you talk about your own country that other people will look at it. I'm not saying the challenges are not there, but talk about also the successes, talk about the positives, have more of the vision of what is possible, have more of examples of what has been done despite all the challenges. And if we can build an NLNG in Nigeria, run it to be world-class, what says we cannot do much more? If we can have a telecoms industry that is competing with everywhere in the world, our social media is probably as good as it gets, our music industry, on and on. You can talk about a lot more positive. So my encouragement will be keep thinking of Nigeria in a positive mindset, attract people to want to come to Nigeria, and describe the challenges as things we are working through, and that we will overcome all these challenges and be a country of greatness. But also, make sure you share your experiences, share your learnings. You are coaches, you are mentors, and if you're not already mentoring others, you need to think about mentoring others. Anyone on this call, the fact that you are educated, that you have ability to connect to the internet, means that you're in the top 10% of Nigerians. So 90% of Nigerians can learn a lot from you. So how many people are you mentoring? Not just in your company, not just in your industry. How many people are you mentoring, coaching in the wider society? So to round up, as mentioned, our country, huge progress in many, many areas that we should be proud of. Some challenges that we're still working through, and we all must continue to work through. The oil and gas industry has made a big contribution to the country in terms of revenues and forex over the years, and still huge opportunities to even do more in those areas. But we have not leveraged the industry well enough to develop other industries, to develop other capabilities in the country. And we must look for those opportunities to do more and contribute more GDP. And more importantly, we as individuals need to think of ourselves as nation builders. We need to think of ourselves in terms of how can we make a difference, and we need to continue to then develop our skills and be actively involved to be able to make a difference. I wish you all a successful celebration of this 61st anniversary. I'm a proud Nigerian, and I'm very, very optimistic that our country will reach its greatness. The 4 trillion GDP expectations that have been identified, we will get there. It may look bleak today, but the ability to think into the future, to work with others, to make a difference, I think will be key. Thank you very much.
Babs, I hope you guys can hear me. Can somebody confirm, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ismail Usman. I'm supposed to moderate the question and answer session for this event. Before I go further, I just want to announce that we have welcomed Her Excellency, Dr. Hajara Ibrahim Salim, the High Commissioner to Malaysia with concurrent accreditation to Brunei Darussalam. You're welcome, ma. I think we'll first take a few questions for Babs, and then after that, we'll go to Her Excellency to give a remark. So Babs, thank you very much for what I think is a very wide and in-depth analysis of Nigerian current situation. I just noted a few things down while you're talking, and I won't repeat the speech, but I just like to highlight that you mentioned important areas around the challenges Nigeria face. I think you also mentioned successes, which I think is really quite important. The progress we have made in terms of the NLNG expansion. You talk about the Dangote refinery as world-class investment in Nigeria. And I think towards the end, you also talk about the technology. You mentioned artificial intelligence, which I also think is really quite key for us to leverage all the incredible human talent that we have in the country. And then you also finally talk about what we can do as professionals to be able to help that view. I have a few questions here, but let me just start by what I think is a very simple one. A certain individual has been trying to get a comment around what are the employment opportunities for youths, and especially going into the energy transition. How do you see that really opening up a new opportunity for wider youth and indeed most Nigerians' employment? I don't know if you can answer that question first. Thank you, Babs.
Thank you, Ismail. And coincidentally, I will be speaking at as a convocation of one of the Nigerian universities in the next 2 months, and this is one of the topics I will be touching on. I think youths will have to think of employment in a different way than it used to be in the past. I think the world is changing significantly with the fourth industrial revolution, and I think many of the traditional jobs that we have today will be taken over by a lot of automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, be it in transportation, autonomous driving, be it in medicine. Like I said, operations are being done by robots. So, traditionally, what you consider as employment, I think you need to start to think of it more in terms of how will you be an entrepreneur yourself. I think the future will be more about entrepreneurs in the future, less about people looking for traditional jobs. An entrepreneur comes in different shapes and forms. Of course, some of it is about skills that you develop for specific things, you can look at skills that will be needed for the fourth industrial revolution. Everything from things like web content development, artificial intelligence, software developer, a lot of those new areas will be where new jobs will come from. Even if you think of the oil and gas industry, there will be less jobs in the future, not just because of the energy transition, but I think because of what technology will bring. And so you need to think of new skill set, which is why I talked about the new multi-skilling. You need to think of those new skill sets that you have to have, because those will be where employment will be in the future. But more importantly, I will ask that people need to think more of being an entrepreneur and think about creating jobs yourself. I remember the example of the two young boys who finished from Babcock University 5 years ago, developed an e-payment system on their own. And today they sold that company for $200 million within 5 years. That's what the global reach and the potential exists for young people, but you have to think differently.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Babs. So there is another one here. So the question says, as we prepare for energy transition, so I'm just going to read exactly what the questioner wrote. So the questioner says he presented a research proposal on development of super electro material for energy storage from agricultural wastes during a government scholarship interview, but interviewers rejected the proposal, saying that oil and gas depot is massive and will not finish anytime soon. So I think the summary of this questionnaire is there seems to be some kind of efforts around what we need to do for any transition, but there seems to be, let's say, some view still that Nigeria has massive oil and gas reserves, and probably it's too early to talk about technologies around energy transition. Maybe you can comment on this.
It's indeed both. So I think it's not one or the other. I think we do have, as I mentioned earlier, we do have oil and gas, huge reserves, and we will need it for a number of years to come. Even most of the countries that talk about net zero, they give dates like 2040, but in most scenarios of oil companies, they still see oil and gas till 2070. But I think even for developing nations, even when the developed countries may have moved earlier, developing countries will still take some time, just because to change the infrastructure, it's not easy to change the energy system. And, we have a lot of power plants, our petrochemicals depend on oil and gas. So there's still many, many years of oil and gas. Nobody should think oil and gas has gone totally. So it is correct when people say, let's still develop our oil and gas, and which is why I believe it's important that we had a PIA. But I think it's not an or question, it's an and question. At the same time, we need to be working on the energy transition ourselves, which is why in my presentation, I said we should start thinking of an EIB, not just a PIB that we pass, but an EIB already that will develop what's our framework, what's our vision, what's our direction, what are the incentives, what are the rules, and so that people can also start to invest. So I will encourage the individual not to be discouraged by those challenges. Change always comes with challenge, but you should understand that the pushback was correct. We will still need to develop oil and gas for many, many years to come. But how do we start to create capabilities on the new energy side so that we are not left behind, and that we also take opportunities that we have. God has blessed us with a lot of those opportunities as well, and we can create jobs, create other opportunities from there. But I think a lot more effort on the development of the EIB to provide the framework, the fiscals, I think is what will be important. And this is a message that I think I'm working also with many others to make sure that the National Assembly can start to, and the government can start to think in that direction as well.
Thank you, sir. So I just have two more in view of time. I mean, the other ones we can compile them, maybe send them to you later on, and then you can give us some response via email. So let me take this one. So if you can share why, in your view, projects like BRAS and OKLNG didn't actually pick up compared to, say, the NLNG, for instance, and what really can we learn from it?
I think firstly, of course, because NLNG has already 6 trains, has an existing infrastructure, has an operation that is ongoing, it's a brownfield. So any additional development is much easier because it's like adding an extension to your house. It's easier to do that than to start a brand new project. So I think that's the first thing to say. And I think the economics of NLNG always will be probably more superior just because, as I said, it's a brownfield, is leveraging on an existing infrastructure. I think BRAS and OKLNJ have various challenges. I will not tell you that I'm an expert in their projects, but I know, for example, that issues such as technology, the technologies that were considered at some point in BRAS was a bit expensive. Even the technical partner had to leave at some point. And there were challenges even with the location in terms of the export capabilities through the sea. It's not as friendly as Bonny is. Bonny is very friendly in terms of sea access. So there are a lot of factors that play into it, and some of that makes the economics much more challenging. Not that you can't solve it, but it's much more challenging. I think, like you saw in Qatar, maximizing your location that is best for such a facility is one of your best strengths. So I think LNG should be grown into a 12-train LNG plant and become a center for LNG. Whilst for locations such as BRAS, I think already a new thought has gone into moving petrochemicals, moving other type of industries there that are more inward looking, not export facing. So I can only say that we have various reasons for why they are challenged, but I can tell you very clearly that NLNG has the luxury of being an existing infrastructure, and so it's easy to build on and add more to it.
Thank you, Babs. And like I said, we have a few more questions, but we'll just compare all of them. I'm going to ask you the last question now. And I'm going to ask also one of my colleagues to share a book that he just wrote, From Storeroom to Boardroom. And I think maybe one of my colleagues can share that. It will be interesting if you can share your thought around what really inspired you to put so much energy into writing that book. This is kind of thing that I think the younger professional would benefit from if experiences are actually properly written by people that have massive experience. How do you see this can actually also help the country in terms of moving into energy transition?
Oh, thank you very much. I think the book is one where I believe leaders in the country, and I've always encouraged leaders before me to write a book, because I think the challenges that we are going through in Nigeria can sometimes feel unique, and I think many leadership books in the world are written with a very developed country mindset, and do not probably reveal some of the challenges we face in Nigeria. And so writing some of these books, I think, helps many people, either younger ones who are coming up, to be able to see what some of the failures that those of us in front failed, where we struggled, what we learned, what worked, what didn't work. And also, can enable even people wanting to come into the country to see what it might take to succeed in the country. So this also provided me an opportunity to provide, mentoring and coaching opportunity, because many of it is about lessons that I learned on projects that I worked on failures that I had, and what were some of the lessons that I learned. And many people who have read the book have also taken some of those lessons, and there were lessons at various stages. Some of the lessons were about developmental activities that I worked on. How did I go through them? What were the challenges? So when I talk about leverage the industry to enable the country, one of the ones I worked on with other colleagues in Shell was to create a helicopter capacity in the country. And we were able to work together, identify a potential local who didn't have all that it takes, but we're working with them and getting Shell support to provide them funding, enable them today to become a helicopter company that supports not just Shell, but other IOCs in the country, and also even IOCs outside the country. So how did we go about it? So some of those, share those lessons and learnings so that others may be able to learn and hopefully can go and do much better than we were able to do during our time. So it's mainly a lessons book, and one which I encourage everyone, a leader or, any good experiences that you had, do use it to mentor and coach others, hopefully help them in their journey as well.
Thank you very, very much, Babs. I think it's been a marvelous time having you with us. We really appreciate the time you have taken. And I will just ask that you stay with us. I know you have to leave at 1 p.m., but please, if you can stay with us, we really appreciate. So the book is there. I think most of you can see the book yourself. So please feel free to get one for yourself. I think it's quite a rich content. And we thank you, Babs, one more time. Thank you very much. So we'll just move on to the next item, which is basically a remark from Your Excellency. Before we invite Your Excellency, I would like to just read the profile of Your Excellency, Dr. Hajira Ibrahim Salim. So you're welcome, March. You arrived, I think, early this year as the High Commissioner for to Malaysia with concurrent accreditation to Brunei Darussalam. Her Excellency. I don't know, Karachi, can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please do go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So like I was saying, Her Excellency is a consummate public administrator by excellence. She retired recently from the National Assembly, public service after spending more than 30 years. Before then, she has been head of Gombe State House Assembly, where she was recognized for her exemplary service and leadership capabilities. Since Your Excellency retired, she has not really retired. She has not rested. She has also been very active in the political landscape of the country. She's a public leader. She's actually been invited by her community to contest more than twice in Gombe Central Senatorial District. And she has very competently served in some of the political associations of the current political system. Your Excellency has also been well-traveled and also taken her education and awards from many countries, both local and international. She had a PhD in 2016 from St. Clements University. I'm also really proud to say that Her Excellency is also very passionate about the plight of orphans. She has a foundation dedicated because of orphans in Nigeria. And in recognition for that service, she has recently been conferred with a traditional title of Madafa of Kaltungo by Kaltungo. So you're welcome, Ma, and it's really glad to have you, Ma. So what we want from Your Excellency is just a brief remark on what you have seen so far in this audience. And I think before you join our leader, the country chair of Shell Company in Nigeria, Mr. Osage, also made a speech where he actually also welcomed you to Malaysia. So maybe you can just take a few minutes to respond to that remark and also give us a good message. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, the chairman of Nigerian community in Brunei, I'm MD Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas, country chairman Shell Company in Nigeria, colleagues from the High Commission who are here with me, Kuala Lumpur, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Well, I was hearing everything that was being said from the beginning because I was seated by 5 o'clock waiting, but there was some mix-up somewhere from connecting to you people. It's not the lack of light. There's no lack of light, but there was some misconnections somewhere, somehow, because I was using the Zoom in the house, the laptop, but you took the email of my personal handset. So the two machines were not responding equally. So thank you very much, sir, for welcoming me to Malaysia and Brunei as the High Commissioner. I think being the first time a lady is going to represent Mr. President as a High Commissioner in these two countries. This topic may be strange, but not strange. It is a topic that when Babs was talking, it's so much very, very excited about talking that. But to me, I will just sit and listen and maybe say the government aspect. The only thing is that I am lucky to know something about the PIB bill because I was in the National Assembly when that bill was brought. And in fact, I'm the director in charge of the chamber that will print the bill. We stayed over 15 years, we couldn't handle that bill. So you can imagine when you are talking and you ask me to talk about liquefied natural gas, I said, yes, I know something about it, but as a High Commissioner, I will talk on the government aspect, not the bureaucrat, your own aspect over there. But the listening was very exciting. I'm just in a hurry because we have the African ambassadors meeting by 8 o'clock. I would have loved to hear more about Babs. And I assure you that that book, I will get it. Ismail, be ready. I will get that book from you from Brunei. So it is my honor and privilege to address today's occasion, celebrating Nigeria's 61st independence anniversary. I'm particularly happy that our compatriots in Brunei are once again in the forefront of lifting Nigeria to the next level. Indeed, the subject matter of today's discussion, Nigerian oil and gas industry and energy transition, Conundrum, is currently at the center of the federal government's drive to transform the national economy. Ladies and gentlemen, you may recall that the president, on the 16th of August, 2021, signed the PIB bill, that's the Petroleum Industry Bill, into law. The PIB Act now, which is an act, as well as Nigerian Gas Initiative, will help transform Nigeria into a gas-based industrialization nation. The PIA will also create a better managed petroleum industry with more value addition for both investors and Nigerians alike. The president has also approved a steering committee to oversee the process of implementation of the PIA. May I at this juncture also quote the vice president. He said, the gas initiative of the federal government include the drive to encourage investment in gas production and optimize the nation's enormous gas potentials. The launch of the PIA converges into a launch of the year 2020 to year 2030 as the decade of gas development for Nigeria, a follow-up in a highly successful initiative of the year 2020 of the year of gas. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Nigerian National Gas Expansion Program was launched with focus on distributing natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas across gas stations operated by Nigerian NNPC. Perhaps today we will be saying NNPC Limited. Again, the PI, I believe you are aware the president had also recently appointed boards of a new NNPC. Well, at this juncture, I may say, is our problem really appointment or our problem is really implementation? The main goal of the passage of the PIB and the gas initiative was to transform Nigeria into a gas-based industrialized nation, though enhanced accelerated gas revolution. The PIA will also help create a better managed petroleum industry where both the people of Nigeria and investors alike can extract real value. Unfortunately, what we are seeing today is a move towards defunding the natural gas project by the EU and World Bank, a position that will obviously put countries such as ours in a very dire situation and make the transition extremely difficult. Indeed, even the UN Secretary General made a strong call that countries should end all new fossils fuel exploration, which we are doing, and production into natural gas, and shift fossil fuel subsidies into renewable energy. You can imagine, put Nigeria into that section now. You may recall that the presidents also had, during the climate action change of 2019, announced plans and initiative by his administration to reverse the negative effect of climate change in Nigeria. The president made it abundantly clear that Nigeria is committed to its obligations under the Paris Climate Change Agreement to meet her nationally determined contribution to ensure a resilient future that mainstream climate risk in our decision making. You can wonder, those who are in the Niger Delta area, you can see the advantage and the disadvantage of a commodity like petroleum. You find the climate there is gone, fishes are gone, the area is condemned. So for Nigeria, a just transition to net zero emissions is one where gas for those who are from that producing countries to be supported in energy generation. A just transition to net zero emissions is therefore through natural gas and subsequently attain more renewable energy sources in our energy mix. I have a lot to say on remarks, but I don't think it is that necessary having the time. Mr. Chairman, if you just allow me to speak on the first question you asked, that is, first commercial oil discovery dates back to 1956 in Olabiri in Bayelsa. Since there has been rapid growth of both internal and external investigation in the sector. According to OPEC, oil and gas earning constitutes some 10% of total Nigerian GDP, which Babs have said, and 70% of country's export earnings. Despite these impressive figures, there is no consensus in Nigeria on the role oil and gas industry has played in the development of the country, either positive or negative. What, in your view, are the challenges causing this? And what can the sector do in collaboration with relevant government agency? That is where I fully come in this place. Because I assure you, whatever we are doing at this webinar, in my capacity as the High Commissioner, I assure you, when you send in this report, I will send it as a dispatch straight to the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which will definitely go to the presidency. And from the presidency, if there is anything that needs to be amended, it comes back to the National Assembly. So I am here standing in for the government and saying that business really in Nigeria, those of us like the time Nigeria started getting oil in commercial quantity is equal to my age. So we should be age mate with the oil. But I think now I've retired, I'm doing something. So we should have retired, definitely in all these things. When you quote Qatar with the gas, you find that it seems, this is personal, and when you are doing the questions and answers, I'm sure some people will bring in this. Government is not a good business organization in Nigeria. You've never seen Dangote's oil falling and doing that. But when the government set it up, is it our fault or is it the government's fault now? We are the government. The people are the government. But when something does not come directly from your pocket, you say it's government's own. Now, this is where we kill ourselves. The federal government over the years, in attempt to address the problems bewildering the Niger Delta area, now let me just close it to an area, had created a ministry, a whole ministry for Niger Delta, an agency, and lots of interventions programs. Some students were sent abroad to go and study. We have the Ministry of Niger Delta. We have the Niger Delta Development Commission as federal institute to implement policies on Niger Delta where oil were produced. I wish to reiterate that the federal government is particularly concerned with the colossal loss. All these things being formed, but there's a colossal loss occasioned by uncompleted and unverified development projects in those areas, in spite of the huge resources made available to uplift the living standard of the citizens. You may recall just on 2nd September 2021, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice received on behalf of Mr. President the report on forensic audit on the Niger Delta NDDC. The AGF noted that the federal government approved about 6 trillion for NDDC in 18 years. The president had in 2019 ordered a forensic audit of the NDDC's operation from 2001 to 2019. The AGF noted that 362 accounts belonging to NDDC were not properly reconciled. Why 362 accounts? There is also on record that there are over 13,177, this I'm quoting with authority, projects, the execution of which is substantially compromised. The federal government is also concerned with the multitude of Niger Delta Commission bank accounts amounting to that I've said 362 bank accounts and the lack of proper reconciliation of the accounts. So the government, in consequence, apply a law to remedy the deficiency outlined in the audit report as appropriate. So you as a group, I will call you the gurus of the oil and gas. You could see the government, on the other hand, it's trying its best. You people, on the other hand, the oil and gas, are doing the best they can. And then there is others in the center who are trying to destroy both the oil and gas and the government. So it is your part of what in your own discussions now, it should be part of your resolution. Where is the way forward? I've told you government have done this, has done that, has done this. Should we leave everything to individuals to do because they are more concerned to business? I was talking jokingly with the chairman the other time. I said, the youths sometimes say, don't touch gas, petroleum and gas, because it is for the children and relations of those in the sector. Like the military, the general produces a general son and he produces a general grandson. So the petroleum sector produce a petroleum son and a petroleum grandson. So it's a mini organization. And we want that organization to succeed because that is where we live. That is what sustains. It's a matter of changing the mind. Definitely not you, either the organization or government. We are not ready yet to ensure that what belongs to the country should belong to the country and should belong to everybody in the country. Some states like my own right now are jumping that oil has been found in the States. Is it an advantage or a disadvantage? We are looking for gas. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would have loved to sit and have this thing. So, I once again thank you all. Thank the community in Brunei. I love you so much. Until this COVID is over, I will come personally so that we discuss. I ask you questions, not you ask me questions.
Thank you, Ma.
May God bless you. Thank you, and may God bless Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. Please, can I ask for a virtual round of applause for Her Excellency? We're very honored to have you, Ma, and I'm aware that you have some guests and you have to leave by 8 p.m. But please, if you do have more time, please stay with us. I think the time we have now is to go to the panel discussion. And so I would like to invite the panelists to unmute their videos, and then I'll also be read the profile of the panelists. And if there are any questions later on, Your Excellency, we'll also come back to you. Thank you very much for such a passionate speech and address to Nigerians here and across the world. So now we're going to the panel discussion. So I would like to start with reading I have the honor of reading the profile of our leader, the country chair shell companies in Nigeria, and the MD SPDC. Like I said, I'm really honored to be reading this profile. Mr. Saige has been the managing director of SPDC and country chair of Shell Company Nigeria since 2015. He is a graduate of business administration and has over 30 years of industry experience in the UK, Brunei, and Netherlands. And I think previously we have alluded to some of the legacies that you left behind while you were in Brunei, which some of us here are really standing on. So thank you for that, sir. In other roles, you have also been a senior advisor for Oxford International, and you have also been the VP Human Resources for Sub-Saharan Africa. You currently chair the board of Shell Nigeria Pension Fund Administration, as well as All One, which is a recently established off-grid energy entity. Mr. Osage is married and blessed with 3 children, and he enjoys music and football. So the next panelist I would like to also introduce is also here with us, Dr. Philip Mishebila. Dr. Philip recently assumed the role of Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Nigeria LNG Limited and the Vice President of Bonigas Transport. Before then, Dr. Philip has been the CEO of Atlantic Energy Company in Trinidad and Tobago. And before then, Dr. Philip has been the GM Gas for Shell Nigeria and the Director of SPDC. He has held a number of senior level positions within SPD, including the Regional Communications Manager in West Africa and the GM Sustainable Development and Community Relations. He has also been the MD of Shell Nigeria Gas and the Crisis Chief of Staff for Shell Nigeria. In the course of over 35 years of Dr. Philip's career, He has held various roles, including planning and integration project director manager for gas and for gas and power, also a commercial manager. And he has also been a private assistant to CEO of Royal Dutch Shell. It's interesting to also point out that Dr. Philip, before joining Shell, was with Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation and the National Oil Chemical Marketing Company, PLC. Dr. Philip has a MBBS degree in human medicine and postgraduate qualification in occupational environmental medicine from University of Aberdeen, Scotland. He also has an MBA from IESC Business School of the University of Navarra, Spain. Dr. Philip loves traveling and exploring new cultures, swimming and spending time with his family. The last, by no means the least, panelist we have is Mr. Michael Ikebudu. Mr. Mike, as we famously call him, is the current chairman of Nigerian section in Panaga, here in BSPJV. Mike is a distinguished and versatile human resource professional with over 23 years of international experience. Mike's HR experience cut across Nigeria, Netherlands, and Brunei. He has been a global HR manager for World Engineering that oversaw World Engineering function across many countries, including Brazil, US, Europe, and Nigeria. When Mike was back in Nigeria, he was the HR manager for engineering and projects, and later became the HR manager for production directorate. In Brunei, here, Mike is currently the HR manager, resourcing planning, and he is the HR lead for Asset Directorate, which is the largest directorate in BSPJV. Mike is also a member of Shell Secondaries Leadership Team in Brunei, and he has been very active coordinating the well-being of all secondaries across the entire Shell group here in Brunei. Mike is a chartered fellow of CIPD London. He is also a PMI certified project manager professional, as well as ICF certified coach. And I think this is my best part. Mike is a passionate and committed advocate for coaching and mentoring. He is a founder of the 360mentor.com, which is a free web-based mentoring platform that brings the mentors and mentees together for mutual growth. I invite all of you to visit the platform and join to contribute as either a mentor or mentee. The website name is the360mentor.com. So that's basically the profile of our panelists. Again, I'm really glad to have all of you here. I know Babs is still around, so there may be some few other questions that we may have to pass on to Babs. But let me just start by saying that this range of questions have come across. They came from a very rich audience of many tens of people from across the globe. So it's a collection of questions from basically very rich professionals. And I would like to start really with the country chair. So, sir, I think everybody have been talking about the PIB, which has been recently passed. There's clearly a very great expectation that this is going to solve many issues or challenges in the oil and gas sector. We all know that we have waited for over 20 years for the PIB to pass. So here goes the question, sir. How much of the industry wishes do you think have come to pass with the version of the PIA that has been passed? What's your view in terms of whether this PIA correctly embeds the energy transition issues? Follow up to that, do you expect a requirement that we may need to have a new act soon if we go into energy transition? And I think generally, do you think PIA currently is in conflict with energy transition aspirations?
Thank you very much, Ismail. A very loaded question, that is. I think where I will start is that, as you just said, PIA as it is now, then PIB was 20 years in the making. So understandably, it's not as heavily anchored on the energy transition as we would have expected the legislation of this currency to have. But it does a lot of significant things for the industry as it is today, certainly for gas as a transition fuel. The PIA has passed. I'm always the first to say it's not a perfect document. As you know, even the president this week has, in the past week, has introduced an amendment in the National Assembly as it is. So that says that this is still work in progress. But I'm always the first to say that of every major piece of legislation that has been passed in our country, this is probably one that received the most consultation. So the industry cannot at all say that we're not consulted. We were consulted fully by the various committees, by the GMD and NPC, by the Minister of State as sponsor, and all sorts of government entities. So whilst we did not get everything we wanted for the industry, it was not for lack of consultation. Government took specific positions in certain areas, and we have a bill. As the energy transition discussion take root in Nigeria, I expect that we will see, from time to time, we will see improvements in that area. But let me just focus on the bits I think Nigeria takes a lot of interest in the energy transition journey, which is gas as a transition fuel. I have to say, if you look at the broad spectrum of gas development, as far as the bill is, the act is concerned, when gas is wet, that's when it has when it's rich in condensate. This bill is actually very, very good in aiding development. So projects like our Asa North or Haji South projects actually improve. The economics improve quite well. I think where we struggle is when the gas is dry, where you don't have the rich condensate to essentially support the gas. And as you know, part of the key objectives of the bill is to essentially delineate the different sectors of the oil and gas value chain, such that you have clearly upstream, midstream, and downstream. And one of the key objectives was to make sure that gas could stand on its own. Without, right now, for you to develop gas that is dry, you need to use what you call the ACFA, which is just the gas framework. You use essentially the oil there to support the gas. But part of the objectives of this bill is if you choose to convert your acreage, you lose that ACFA cover. So that just makes gas almost impossible to do. So we are struggling right now with some of our dry gas projects, such as HI, as some of you would know, because the economics are really challenged given the kind of costs we are seeing for the development. So in broad terms, PIB introduces a lot of positives, introduces clarity, introduces that element of stability that we have lacked for many years. But there are still one or two areas I would say have concerns, and I just raised one, which is dry gas development. In the future, as Nigeria gets a lot more into the energy transition debate, where we now start really talking about CCS and all the other technologies and how we go into much more alternative energy sources towards our net zero ambition as the as a community of the world, because we have to be part of this world, I expect to see a few more tweaks here and there. But for now, the primary objective of the PIB is to make hay while the sun shines, to maximize our oil and gas production today. So we, as a country, we have to be careful as we jump on this train to also make sure that we have to survive today before we get into the net zero time. And as I think Bob said earlier, much of the planning we see still have to live with fossil fuels way into the next couple of decades. So PIB is intended that to make it while the sun shines, to make sure we indeed can maximize our oil, but even in particular, gas production. So back to you, Ismail.
Thank you, Country Chair. I think it's really gladdening to hear a lot of collaborative work. Like you mentioned, I've gone into the PIB. I hear that a lot of positives, a lot of clarity as well in to maximize the oil and gas value chain. I hear that like any other act, this is not really perfect. So clearly there will be expectation that things will actually be changed as we go along. I think one part you mentioned about the dry gas, which I also think is something that, especially now that Nigeria has launched, and you mentioned that in your previous talk, that we have launched the gas for decades. I think it's clear to me that this is something that we need to go back to. But let me go to Dr. Philip, because I think one of the important area that we have always had, especially between the what I will call the let's say the Mint, which is Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey, and then the BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. There seems to be some I won't call it conflict, but some kind of this kind of non-alignment between the global north and global south in terms of the importance and whether the energy transition is really critical, right? Do we really need to have it now, or are we better off just really keep producing what we have, and then we'll talk about energy transition later on? What's the urgency, do you think, for the oil transition? Do you think this is really like a political struggle between the global north and global south, or this is something that we need to have now?
Thank you very much, Ismail, and let me recognize Her Excellency and the Ambassador and Country Chair, as well as my predecessor, Babs Motoa, as well. I think to your question, there's no doubt that there's an urgency. You have to be dead not to recognize that climate change is a reality, and climate change doesn't pick and choose between rich country and poor country. It impacts everybody, whether you're in the north or the south. It really doesn't select. And so, whether we're talking about wildfires in California, we could be talking about floods in Bangladesh or hurricanes in the Caribbean, rising sea levels in the Maldives. It really almost doesn't matter where you are anymore. We're all subjected to climate change. So the threat is the same, and it affects everybody, and it's getting worse. So places that have been largely spared, like Nigeria, it's, at the pace that things are going, if they continue, it's just a matter of time. And that's why it's an imperative on everybody, regardless of where you are, which country. There are no boundaries. We just have to take this with a sense of urgency. But when you then come to the response to it, I think that's where we then begin to see some differences. And so while you may look at a portfolio or a suite of options around how to respond, to climate change, what choices individual countries make will then depend on what impact it's having on them. It will depend on what types of resources that they have at their disposal. It will depend on what they can afford as a country. It will depend on what sort of human capital they have available, and so on and so forth. And so all of those factors will need to be taken on board to determine how each and every country responds. And so generally speaking, you will find that, and this point has been raised by both Babs and Osage, the richer countries in the West are better positioned, both in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of resources to be able to move forward with the energy transition, because they're going from a very different starting point, right? We're not all starting on the same line, right? And so they are able to move faster. They're already ahead in many ways and can therefore move at a different pace. A lot of the developing countries, first of all, dealing with, I mean, if you remember some of the numbers that Babs put up around poverty, right, unemployment, and all of those factors, the lack of infrastructure, and so on and so forth. That's our own starting point. And so if you start from there, you then have to ask yourself the question, what is the right pathway for me as a particular nation to take forward? So if you take a country, like Nigeria, for example, very well endowed in terms of oil and gas, resources. And so the question is, do we just shut all the valves, stop producing, and then attempt to deploy all of our resources into going solar or wind or biomass or whatever? I mean, that would be suicidal for us as a nation. And so, as has been mentioned previously, we need to look at both. And it's a case of how do we deploy what we have while at the same time transitioning as quickly as we can, in a way that makes sense for us. And I think, Babs gave a really good example of a country that seems to be doing that quite well, and that's Qatar. Qatar sits on one of the biggest reserves of gas in the world. It realizes that this climate change and energy transition is a must. And what it has done is it has accelerated its growth from 77 million tons per annum of LNG. It's trying to add another 30 plus on top of that as quickly as possible, so that it can monetize what it already has. But because it has been blessed with natural gas and not coal or oil, it also sees longevity within the energy transition, because we do see natural gas as a transition fuel as well. So it's well positioned for that. But note what it's doing. It is using the revenues that it gets from that natural gas that it is accelerating the production of in the market to develop itself and position itself as a knowledge economy, as a digital economy, as a completely different country from where it started. And I think that's an example that we should be looking very closely at. If you look at Guyana as an example, their oil reserves, it just seems like everywhere you drill, you just get gushes of oil coming out. And together with ExxonMobil, they are putting down, a number of FPSOs a year, right, to try and monetize that as quickly as possible. The real question is, what do they use those revenues for? Does it transform them, or do they just waste it? And so those are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves, and the developing world needs to be asking itself. But if you leave aside the resource-rich countries, and you look at those that are not, how are they also tackling the change? And again, it needs to be different. And so, in summary, what I'll say is, there is an urgency to this because it impacts all of us, and we all need to do something. But we're starting from different places, and how we go about it, therefore, needs to be different.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. I think I hear you say that this is a challenge that basically is for all of us, no matter where you sit, whether you're developing countries or developed country. I also hear you say the strategies and also how we tackle this may differ, because we basically have different resources, both human as well as material. But I think that gets me down to, I think, the part, which is really about the human resource, and I'd like Panaga chairman to address that question. So clearly, oil and gas industry has benefited from, let's say, significant training of human resources in terms of manpower, and we do have a lot of them, a lot of professionals in the early part of planning, design, commercialization of oil and gas projects. How do we make sure that we leverage on these very important, let's say, well-trained professionals to help Nigeria as a country as we transit from the oil and gas into more low carbon oriented kind of energy sources? I think you have to unmute, Mike. Mike, you have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now clear. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to unmute, I was muting myself. Thank you very much. I think this is a very important question. And I think it would be fair to say that Nigerians in the oil and gas industry have done quite a lot. But when it comes to what we can do, to benefit from the energy transition, I think first of all, I think as professionals, we have to continue to support the positive and the progressive government policy that encourages both local and foreign investors. Like we've all said during this discussion, we still need this industry for time to come. But I think it's very, very important that we continue to influence the policies wherever we are in the organizations to attract both local investors and the foreign investors as well. I think also if you look at the capital projects that are coming across our way, it's very important also that we use our positions to challenge and ensure that there is efficiency and the sustainability of these capital projects in terms of some key decisions that we make to ensure that we don't continue doing the way we have always done it, which is probably not taking into consideration the transition that is going on. So our project has to be compliant as well as we move on. I think we can also be very active in facilitating and attracting technology transfers, especially when it comes to new innovations. If you ask me, I would say that we can actually make Nigeria a place of choice when it comes to product development. And we can do that by ensuring that we become more proactive and or rather much more receptive in innovations and new technologies, such a way that these foreign investors can actually use Nigeria as a place to test the new production, or rather the new technologies and the new initiatives. I think also we can. I think Babs talked a lot about coaching and mentoring, which is an area that I'm quite passionate about. As professionals in this industry, we can facilitate and encourage coaching and mentoring as part of the overall capability development of Nigerians in the oil and gas industry. And they're talking specifically about energy transition. We can actually begin to influence and work with the various organizations, including NGOs, in order to continue to support in the making energy transition a big topic that everybody is involved in and everybody is passionate about discussing. Because at the end of the day, I've heard that it might take us some years to get to where we want to be, but before we get there, we need to prepare ourselves, and especially the young people, with respect to their developing the capability that is required in the new industry. How do they gonna be able to compete? We need to be able to ensure that the coaching and mentoring becomes part of become institutionalized in the way we approach developing these capabilities and making sure that we are a bit more future-oriented in our approach. I think that's the way I will contribute to that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I think I like the mentoring part. It's clearly an area that you are very passionate about, and I fully agree with you. It's an area where all of us can actually do more as professionals to be able to give back. But I'll just want to go back again to the country chair. I know that our time is going very, very fast. So we need to make use of all the brain power we have now. So, sir, I think one question that we got, and actually we got that from repeatedly a number of people, is really about shell company in Nigeria being seen as leaders for the IOC in the country. And naturally, many Nigerians, both in public and private sectors, do look towards shell companies in Nigeria to lead when you have new initiatives. I think in your earlier talk, you did mention about All One, which is one initiative that actually is creating a lot of jobs. So I think what we would like you to talk about how is Shell Company Nigeria leading that space in a transition? What are we really doing? What is all about? And more importantly, do you see other IOCs taking following up and doing what they're supposed to do to help the country move to other direction?
Yeah, thanks, Ismail. It is difficult in our country to discuss energy transition at this stage without a key focus on gas as a transition fuel, but also, frankly, because it's a rich source of funds to us as a people. I mean, I can't remember the numbers now, but Nigerian LNG on its own, significant contributor to our own GDP and government revenues. So gas always has to be front and center. Nigeria is rich in across board, whether you are talking solar, you're talking wind and all of that. But the reality of today is that we need to fund that transition, and we need to fund it using the base of what we have today in oil and gas. Not just me, I think we are all proud of the pioneering role Shell has played and continues to play in this area. The story of Nigerian LNG, of our LNG and gas, has played would not be complete today without the pioneering leadership of Shell. As you know, we are the only IOC in the country that has a wholly owned domestic gas business. And Philip on the call probably was a past MD of that entity. So we are just continuing that tradition by seeding this company, Olon. Olon is essentially anchored on reaching the underserved, particularly in the Niger Delta. As you know, maybe 50% of our folks in the Delta are actually not on the electricity grid of the country. And almost 60–70% of them have bad grid, which is less than 4 hours of electricity a day. So this is a dire development challenge for us. So Olon was set up to essentially try and address that gap. And addressing that gap is not just in terms of investment. We have put in northwards of $20 million to support companies who are pioneers in this space. Companies like solar companies. This year alone, they have had about 9,000 connections. To date, over 40,000 since coming in. So it's actually an entity that's punching above its weight. But very importantly, in terms of thought leadership, we commit quite a bit of our funding into sponsoring policy reviews, supporting government institutions, supporting bodies like Nigerian Economic Summit Group, essentially in formulating policy that addresses our energy challenge. So quite apart from the government institutions that are funding entrepreneurs to essentially expand as energy access in this area, we also are very, very strong in advocacy and thought leadership. One thing we are not doing all along is that we are not funding companies that are anchored on fossil fuels, which is a bit of, that looks like a bit of and inconsistency, given my strong advocacy that we need to develop our energy sources today to be able to fund our budgets, but also fund the transition. But there's a realization that if Shell doesn't lead in this space, the country will probably come short. So that's why we have deliberately set up Holland to focus on non-fossil fuel-based access to energy, so mainly solar. We would expand it, we keep expanding it. In fact, at full, when it's fully developed, this is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. What is also very important is that it's a wholly Shell-funded entity. It is not a JV. So there's no NNPC or Total money there. It comes straight out of the Shell pockets. Just to put our mouths, to put our money where our mouth is. We have also recently, as you would have heard, set up Shell Energy Nigeria to build on the proud legacy of Shell Nigerian Gas. So this is an entity that would go beyond Shell Nigerian Gas and frankly be able to source gas, not just from SPDC, but everywhere else, and play a lot more in the domestic gas market. So we are targeting areas, I have said in some of our calls, like the Lekki area. So this organization is going to grow extensively. It's going to be a much bigger entity. As a matter of fact, as we rethink our footprints in the Delta, in the SPDC, we are also expanding our footprints in the cleaner energy space, anchored on gas distribution and power. So we've also just, as you're probably aware, that the group has also set up today an energy access directorate with a VP. And they are focusing on 4 key regions. Nigeria is one of the regions. All the other regions are regions, e.g. Southeast Asia, Europe. But for Nigeria, apart from having a West African hub, we have Nigeria as an hub. And so far, about 25% of their funding will go into Nigeria. So there's a lot Shell is doing in this space to deal with both our issue of energy access, which is one of the poorest in the world, but also to lead the thinking, and not just the thinking, the investments in alternative energy sources. So I've mentioned solar with Holland. I've mentioned gas now. We are part of a strong global organization that will always lead in technology terms. So I think as a company, we will borrow shamelessly from CCS technology or whatever else we have available in the group to make sure we lead in this space. By a long stretch, Shell is certainly the leader in this space, in this country. Other IOCs are doing their own. I know Total at some point was thinking of a big solar plant, I think in Katsina or somewhere in the north of the country. I don't know what has come of that now. So others are doing their own things, but Shell clearly is leading the space in this area. Thanks. Smell, back to you.
Thank you, Country Chair. I think it's really gratifying to see what Shell is doing, and I also took note that you mentioned the other IOCs are doing something similar, and hopefully all are going towards the direction that would need to be. So I'll just want to go back to Philip. Really talking about the NLNG Train 7, and also I think Bas mentioned the massive gas reserves that we do have back in Nigeria. The country chair also mentioned the gas for decades, which is really about the country leveraging the huge gas resources to industrialize the nation. But do you really see this kind of transition to gas as maybe one step forward that Nigeria is taking towards the overall transition? Do you see gas being probably, let's say, in terms of revenue profile, less than oil? Do you see that's been able to sustain the revenue need for the federal government? And I think lastly, what next after gas? I think you have to unmute, Philip.
Yeah, sorry, got that now. Yes, thank you. Good questions. I think one of the things that's emerged recently, and I'm just coming back to Nigeria, so riding on the back of my predecessor and people like the country chair and others who have been instrumental to some of this, has been this talk about the year of gas last year and kind of launching the decade of gas. And I think it's something which the government has been promoting quite strongly. This is something which NLNG is actually sponsoring and has paid for a lot of the consultancy work that is underpinning that decade of gas work that has happened so far. We are now kind of wrapping up the first phase, which is pulling together all the work that has been done in the past, so that we have a common understanding of where we are. So whether it was gas master plan, all different documents and work that was done historically, it was important to pull all of that together, understand where we are, and then get into the conversation about where we want to get to, as a country. And I think it is extremely timely. Frankly, I would say a bit late, but hey, never, better late than never. And so we are still able to make a huge difference where we are. And a couple of the other things that have come together about the same time to actually launch this on good standing are the PIA, which Osage talked quite extensively about, because I think aside from giving the clarity and setting up governance and so on, he has described it as a basis for future investment. And that's critical for us, going forward. So the PIA is critical. I think that our export business, which has always done better than the domestic business, and you can see that with the launch of the FID on Train 7 and the start of execution of the construction work there, which will give us over 30% incremental capacity at NLNG, which helps us to then remain amongst the top 10 LNG producers in the world. That's absolutely important. Other work that's been happening on the domestic side have been around the refining element. So the Dangote refinery, even though that is oil, but there's a petrochemical element of it that is quite important. And then there are a number of initiatives around domestic CNG, as well as LPG that have been going on as well. And in fact, even some conversations around domestic LNG for that matter. So we're beginning to tackle this from a multifaceted approach. And I think that is exactly the right approach to take. A lot of this has to mature. Some of it is on the drawing board, some of it is in early stages. But I do want to highlight one aspect that I think if we do not crack, then we will be left behind, almost certainly, in the energy transition. And that for me is power. 60 to 70% of our domestic gas gets consumed by power. And that is the one thing that we have failed to crack till today. And if we don't crack power, we will not participate at the pace that we need to in the energy transition. Why do I say this? Because electrification is at the heart of the energy transition. When you look at solar or wind or many of the other forms of renewables, what do? They generate electricity, and it is that electricity that is then used to convert that energy into other forms of energy to do other things. So electricity is the conduit, and natural gas is one of the best, well, it's certainly the cleanest and most efficient way of generating electricity from hydrocarbons, and we have it in abundance. So electrification is at the heart of the energy transition. Electrification is critical to Nigeria participating in that energy transition. but that's the one thing we have not cracked. And there are a number of reasons why. In my view, part of it is to do with just making the power value chain work end to end, right from the gas well all the way to the light bulb. It has to work economically for all of the investors in that chain. And today it doesn't. Part of the reason is because the electricity tariff is regulated, is controlled at an unreasonably low level. There therefore needs to be either you release that and liberalize it, or you subsidize it adequately. And you can subsidize it directly or indirectly. An indirect way is managing the upstream fiscals. Now, some attempt has been done, put to work to achieve that within the PIA. And I think that's good work. Whether it is sufficient or not, we'll have to see. I don't think it is sufficient when you look at the entire power value chain in its entirety. So more has to be done on that so that we open that up, because when looking forward, look at what's happening to transportation. Cars are electrifying. I mean, nations around are saying by so year, they want 50% of their vehicles as electric, and so on. Even when you look beyond to the financial sector, Bitcoin is actually one of the biggest consumers of power, electricity, in the financial sector. And if it does launch and become a more common, come to more common use, the demand on electricity is going to be tremendous from that as well. So from all intents and purposes, that's something that we just have to fix. In addition to all of the other things that I described, therefore, I think that the approach of the decade of gas is important. I hope that it is not another piece of work that gets done and is then put on the shelf. I'm optimistic, and that's why I'm supportive of NLNG, continuing to push that work. But it needs to tackle some very specific things and to create a framework for the energy transition as part of it. And so, Osage mentioned CCS, for example. Today, we do not have a framework, a policy framework for CCS. So if I, as NLNG, wanted to re-inject, CO2, DPR hasn't got a regulatory framework to govern that today. Those kinds of things all need to be put in place and put in place very quickly in order to facilitate all of the different elements that will need to form our transition into a different energy world that's ahead of us, and for us as a country to remain competitive as well. So I'll just pause there, Ismail, and hand it back to you.
Yeah, so Philly, I just want to give you another leading question to that, which is, do you think Nigeria can be a leader in the energy transition? Do you think if we start early with all the things that you have actually mentioned, do you think we have an opportunity for Nigeria to lead the other African countries as, let's say, green energy leader?
Absolutely. Without a doubt, we still can, despite, like I said, starting late. I think we still can. And the reason we can is because we have, number one, the human capacity to do so. We have the people, we have the brains, the intellect, and all of that to come up with the innovation and the concepts. We can actually tap on existing technology that exists in other parts of the world that others have developed, and it's about deploying them correctly. So that's easy. Even without a strong R&D base, right? We can use our human capability to pull all of that together. We have the resources ourselves to actually begin to do these things domestically, and then to begin to look at our region. And there are numerous things that we can do. If you look at some of the things I talked about, LNG, for example, we could do regional LNG and supply that to West Africa and beyond, other parts of Africa. LPG is something which, if we produced enough, we can actually market that, satisfy our local demand, which is rapidly growing, which is a positive thing, but also go beyond, our borders. Many people don't realize that Nigeria has always exported electricity. We've exported electricity to our neighbors for decades, right? That's something that we can also build on. because as I said, electricity is going to be at the core of the energy transition. And so we can grow that beyond what it has been so far. So there's so many ways that we can tackle the regional perspective so that we are and we remain leaders in the energy arena within Africa.
Thank you very much, Philip. I would just like to go back to the country chair again, because some of these questions coming up really wants the country chair to comment. So I think one that I also come out from, let's say, several sources about. So we do see the IOCs, Shell, BP, and others really set an agenda in terms of net zero 2050, and also having a portfolio mix going forward. So there are concerns around, let's say, the IOCs, and not just one, not just one particular one. Many of them actually divesting from their fossil fuel in Nigeria. And the need to actually attract, let's say, new investors in, let's say, other green energy initiatives. And then there's also the overriding concern about the security challenges. Are we really ready for this new basket of investors coming in? So I know it's a little bit of, let's say, many questions together, but how do you see how do you see the current IOCs coming in trying to divest? Do you see that as positive, negative? And what's your advice to Nigeria to get ready for this, for potentially new investors, and hopefully having proper security framework and landscape where they can, let's say, benefit from their investments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I think a loaded question, but a very interesting and topical one, actually. You've heard me say severally that I'm a firm believer that Nigeria's hydrocarbon resources will be developed, whether by IOCs, NOCs, or indigenous players. It's difficult to remember that when many of us started this company, when we started in this company, you only had IOCs. Even the likes of ADAX and co were seen as quite small. But today, at least in terms of numbers, you can see that the landscape has changed significantly. So whether IOCs step back, made this mainly, frankly, from the onshore operations, and as you can see, you cannot divulge issues of security, sabotage, and whatever underpinning those decisions. As we step back from the onshore footprint, other players will step in. They could be national indigenous companies. They could be other internationals who are not grabbing a lot of the scale of the 5 main IOCs we have today. But one thing I'm sure of is that Nigeria will not leave its hydrocarbons in the ground. It will develop it for the benefit of the Nigerian people. Having said that, security is a big issue in our country today. It's also a huge issue in our operations. I looked at the numbers yesterday. Our reconciliation factor, that is the factor between what you put in the pipe and what arrives at the terminal, was 33%. That means 77%, or if my math says me right, 67% or thereabouts of what we produce. Okay, you have to make some adjustment for maybe 10-11% for water treatment. But easily 50% of what you put in the pipe of hydrocarbons don't get to the terminal. We have been talking about this for decades. We have been unable to address it. If anything, it's getting worse. Many of you have friends in Port Harcourt. There's almost no week we don't have a colleague of ours in captivity from kidnappers. what we see in the South is child's play compared to what is happening in the north of the country, where people just drive in and take busloads of school kids and start demanding ransom. So we have real security challenges. But as Bab said during this conversation, it's important we focus on what we can do rather than just keep complaining. Without a doubt, it has an impact in the appetite of people willing to invest in our country. When people from outside the country talk to me, who have potential interest in the oil and gas industry, talk to me. By the time they are in their second statement, questions around security, sanctity of contracts, those kind of things come to the surface. So as a country, this is a national challenge. 2 weeks ago, the GMD of NNPC led a team of the industry to see the Chief of Defense Staff to just make our case. You probably recognize that as we are, despite the cuts, the OPEC quota we have that is a reduced one because of the need to stabilize prices. In the course of this year, we have not been able to meet that quota in Nigeria. SPDC's production today, when I looked at the numbers yesterday, at least close to 50,000 barrels is lost between per day, is lost between the TMP and the TRP. So we do have a very fundamental security challenge that we must address. As it is anyway, security is a primary responsibility of the state, so we can only contribute in terms of providing information, providing technologies such as drone technology to try and support their operations. But it has to be clear that leadership for security in the country is that of the sovereign. We just have to be in a supporting mode. So big challenge there, but all our minds must be tailored towards seeing how we can resolve it. That's really where investments can flow into our country, whether for the traditional fossil fuels or transition fuels, or we're even talking about new energies. It is going to have to be underpinned against the background of a strong, secure environment to operate. Thanks, and back to you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I'm very, very conscious of time, but I would just want to maybe go back to Mike Ikebudu on a very kind of pertinent question around, again, we have, like we said before, talented, professionals in many IOCs within the country, and I think there has been a question around how can these professionals really, kind of influence the IOCs to make the right decisions that benefit the country, Nigeria, in terms of, again, the green energy principles, in terms of initiatives, in terms of supporting education agencies. How do you see the huge human resource, or less Nigerians working for the IOC have been able to achieve this, and what can they do more to tailor IOC decisions towards what is beneficial to Nigeria?
Okay, confirm you can hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so thanks very much for this question. I think I will dwell more on the latter part of the question because I've responded to the previous one regarding what the oil industry professionals can do. So I would like to pay probably more attention on what the industry can do with the higher institutions, like you said, because this raises a very important issue around the nature of careers in the energy industry in years to come. And I know Babs has made some references about that, because it's really important that we begin to become much more conscious about how this could impact the students we have in universities today, or even young professionals or young graduates who are coming out of the universities. So I think, first of all, among many other things we could do, there needs to be a focus and deliberate collaboration between the industry and the higher institutions when it comes to energy transition. And by this, I mean really supporting the industry, collaborating with the industry, especially along the full value chain of renewable energy development. And this will include the production, research and development, even the maintenance of the renewable energy facilities like we've talked about. You're going to require a lot of new kind of professionals to be able to do those things. Even things around the renewable energy waste management is going to throw up a lot of careers and vocations that we probably don't have today. So it's very, very important that while we talk about investing in these facilities, avoiding, it's important we don't avoid the benefit that we could gain by collaborating with universities. And this we could do by ensuring that we influence the kind of curriculum or kind of courses that the universities offer. Because if you look at some other universities outside Nigeria, some of them have already reduced or sometimes completely stopped offering courses in that has to do with oil. So for that reason, I think it is important that we influence the universities to develop those kind of curriculum that will affect the future careers of the that are going to come up in the energy transition. And in doing this, I think the key critical factor for this collaboration will be in funding. So I've had a lot of some of the speakers talking about the funding that is going to be going on into this energy transition. It's really, really very important, but it's also very good that we support the universities and higher institutions in Nigeria to be able to produce the kind of professionals that will be going to be driving these activities in the future. Why this is very, really key is because if you look at our universities, even the so-called federal universities, they're struggling with funds, even to do basic things. And therefore, there's going to be a lot of help they need from the energy industry for them to be able to play in this area. You know, I've had a situation where some state universities have not been able to do their convocation for the past 5-10 years. And just because they are waiting for state governments to provide the money for convocation. And until that money comes, they are not able to do their convocation. So you can imagine things that are as basic as that, they're struggling with it. So it's really very important that we collaborate with them, influence the development of the courses to ensure that they're able to produce the kind of people that we need. I think another aspect that oil industry can really help in this is supporting the establishment of real NGOs, local NGOs that will educate, I've talked about it before, educate and sensitize the public really. It's very, very important because if we do not carry the public along, especially the ones we call uneducated, then we are likely gonna be struggling to create the market as well that we need for this. So it's very important we support the local NGOs to really educate and sensitize the public. I think another important area is the issue around, I've talked about it, coaching before, but I think specifically on this is about the role the universities can play. And I'm not referring to people coming to the industry or the companies to do sabbaticals, but I'm really talking about supporting professors and lecturers to go outside Nigeria, get involved with the research that is going on, bring back the technology back to us as well. I think that will really help us in influencing what is going to happen in the industry. In addition to the effort we're going to be making in supporting and influencing the positive policy that will be coming from the government. I think these are some of the things I think the industry can really help in making sure that we are not left behind, because we've talked about digitalization in the past, and you can easily see that we are playing a catch-up game in that area. We really have an opportunity now to collaborate with these institutions to ensure that we are able to play actively and influence the game. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. So again, I'm really in the kind of conundrum. There's a lot more questions, but I know we don't have time. But I would just like to give the last one to Philip, because I think the other ones we will have to collect them and then we'll send them to the teams, and hopefully we get some written responses back from our leaders. So Philip, you will take the last one. PIA just gets signed into law. I think we're all excited about that. I mean, country chair has talked extensively around it, but there's still some kind of people saying, why don't we have some fund within the PIA framework that will be set aside for energy transition? So I know, for instance, the NLNG kind of framework, do we have like escrow fund or some sort of fund that's okay, this is coming? Do you see that something that could really help unlock, if we get to the time where energy transition hit off the face? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ismail. It's an interesting question. Yeah, the PIA does not contain any specific fund that is targeted only at energy transition. Of course, it provides for all kinds of funds, community fund and all kinds of other things. I'm going to be very blunt here, right? As a country, we have not been very good at managing funds. So when you set aside a fund for something and wait for the need to then follow, it has never been, we don't have a good track record of that. Quite frankly, I would prefer that where the role of government, is best achieved, is setting in place a framework that actually allows for private sector as well as public-private sector collaboration to then drive investment in that area that then produces the kind of results that meets our national objectives. That's what I would rather we as a country focused on. Once the government goes beyond setting frameworks and policies, and at a high level, maybe some governance, and starts getting into managing funds, it distorts the market, it slows things down, and just becomes a lot more challenging. So as far as I know, there isn't such a fund within the PIA. I would not advocate that there should be, quite frankly. And I think that the best way to finance the energy transition is through those public-private sector type collaborations. But the framework, as I touched on earlier, needs to indeed be set by the government around policy, around targets, around mandates, around, what is it that we want to, and you've seen that in many other countries, of course. That's the sort of thing that we need. But the actual investment should then follow, and people will invest when they see a framework that is investor friendly, and where they can actually put in money and recover their returns and so on and so forth. So that would be my advice on that point.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip. What an exciting day. So we've really come to the view of time, really, because I know there are also people still raising up their hands. So let me just check with the back room. Do we have any question that we want to take from the audience? Okay, I hear silence. So
I think Karachi said that's all we have.
Okay, thank you, Karachi. So like I said, we have a lot of written ones, but we really don't have time. So we'll have to really come back to your teams to help us reach out to you and provide some written answers. So on that basis, I really want to thank you all for the time you have spent today. I know it's a significant part of your time that you have given us. It's really appreciated. I think following this, we'll touch base with your teams. We plan to have a recorded version of this. And like the High Excellency said before, she was interested in seeing the outcome of this and how she can cascade this to the right people. So we'll check with your teams just to make sure that everything is properly done and what we have recorded can be shared beyond this group. So again, thank you very much. This is the end of the Q&A session. And I know that Karachi will have like the video photo session that we want to take. Is that right? Karachi, you can unmute.
Yes. We're hoping at this point to take a picture with the most of the people that have spoken to us tonight. So if they could just please kindly put their cameras on, we will just spotlight everyone's picture and take a quick screen grab. Thank you very much. There's been lots of feedback coming from the chat here, even personal messages about the impact of this panel session. Some are not wanting it to end. Some are upset that the questions have not been taken because the questions have been coming in at a very fast rate and we really can't take everything. We're running close to 3 hours as it is already. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll quickly take a screen grab now. Sadly, this is what the pandemic has caused, where pictures are being taken online. Thank you very much. Yes, the picture has been taken. Thank you so much. So we can move on to the next item now, Mr. Usman.
Okay, so the next item really is to have a closing remark by Dr. Philip. Also a goodwill message. Again, we all congratulating you for taking a new position. We wish you all the best. So good to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ismail. Now I'm going to make this extremely short. I know our time is far spent, but I think first I just want to thank you, the committee, and the whole Nigerian sector of the Panel Club, for setting this up, because I think it is absolutely important that not only do we remember our nation's birthday, but that we actually use it as a time for reflection. And I think that's what you guys have done here. I'm privileged to have participated in this, and so my appreciations for that. I think that the role of the diaspora is extremely important, whether you're just out on an assignment or you're actually living somewhere else. The diaspora plays an important role in the development of Nigeria. It is the opportunity we get to go out and broaden and get new knowledge and so on. And for some of us, to come back to the country and try and add value. I just returned from Trinidad and Tobago, and one of the most common questions that I've been getting has been, why are you going back? I mean, the country is upside down and this and that, and all kinds of stories. And it's everywhere I turn. That's the same question. And I'm like, but it's home. And not only is it home, I have just gotten the opportunity to develop, to broaden, to learn more. And I now have a chance to go back and apply it as my own contribution to Nigeria's development, in a very unique position. I mean, it's just, I can't even think about not coming back, right? So I do think that it is important, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, to constantly ask ourselves that question of, how can we contribute to improving and making Nigeria a better place? This is one of the things that I really like about the vision of NLNG, which I think started way back in Bab's time. Tony, I think, inherited it and kept it. I have now inherited it and I keep it. And part of that vision is about working towards making, they're working for a better Nigeria, making Nigeria a better place, and that vision, I think, just is eternal. And that's what all of us need to be doing, regardless of where we are in the world. So, it is therefore important for us to recognize that just because we're outside doesn't mean that we don't have a role to play. And that comes back to one of the points that Babs mentioned around being the change that we want to see. Because if we don't see ourselves as that, then we will only be sitting by the sidelines and complaining, which I think there are already too many Nigerians doing that. We don't need to add to that number. The energy transition, I think, is not only just a topical issue for discussion, it is probably one of the biggest challenges that we will face in the next decade or so as a nation. And I say this because if I speak from the NLNG perspective, NLNG is one of, if not, and probably has been for a long time, the biggest taxpayer in Nigeria. And from that vantage point, if we lag behind on the energy transition, we are approaching a time when if your LNG cargoes are not clean, because we're now hearing about net zero LNG cargoes being sold around the world, where offsets and all kinds of other things have been used, to manage the carbon abatement. You will be selling your cargoes at a discount. In other words, there's an economic imperative, beyond just, climate change and saving the world and so on. There's an economic imperative for NLNG as a company, but for Nigeria as a country to embark on the energy transition. And so that is a key driver for us, to pursue this. Nigeria is indeed well positioned to play a leading role, not only in Africa, but I think in the world, and in many different ways, because we have the human capital to do so. And that, I think, is our biggest strength. It's just that human capital, and we need to keep tapping on it. So finally, I just want to thank the organizers of this event and appreciate the fact that you have made a virtual event like this a success. The world, as somebody said earlier, has gone virtual. And so this is indeed the way that things are being done now and will continue for quite some time, I believe. It's important for you guys to also remember that you're not just there for yourselves, but you remain ambassadors of Nigeria, wherever you are. And that is a key thing for us to always be mindful of, that we are representing our country, anywhere. There's a perception of the country. And I think as individuals, wherever we are, the messages that we send, we create touch points for a different narrative about Nigeria. So I would say keep up the good work. Thank you for this invitation. And I wish everybody a very good night in Brunei and success going forward. Thank you, Ismail.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any final words from the country chair? Otherwise, as the last day we have today.
I think Philip has covered the ground well. I think I should just add my voice of thanks to you, to Mike, and the rest of the organizers of this. I think it's a very high quality event. I'm glad that the IT stood up. That's always the challenge. Not to celebrate our country at 61, but to pick a very important and topical issue like the energy transition as the core topic. To also, on your behalf, thank Babs. Always very impressive to listen to him. Of course, that's my co-panel. So, million thanks. I will just re-echo the points that Philip has made, that you are all fundamentally ambassadors for this country, wherever you are. And so please keep the flag flying. I have a particular interest in making sure our credibility and reputation in Brunei stays intact. It's been there for many years, and I'm glad that you guys are keeping it going. So thank you, and congratulations again on this day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to close, I will just, as the chairman of the NIAC organizing committee, I would just want to thank everybody that has participated in this. I think when we were sourcing the questions, we had registration more than 100 people. And I can also see that we have more than 50 people that stayed throughout. I want to thank all the audience, wherever you are. Thank you for keeping faith. I think it's really quite an exciting event. I want to thank Her Excellency that has to leave, unfortunately, because she had a commitment. It was really nice for her to be here, and we'll keep looking forward to that continuous interaction. I want to thank our leader, our father, the country chair of Shell Nigeria, Mr. Osage. So thank you for always being there for us. I think spending this time with us is really quite appreciated. Such a long time, actually. I also want to thank Babs. I think it took us a long time to come to London to actually reach Bob for him to be able to actually speak to us. But I'm happy that he lived up to it, and as we expect, very rich discourse, and also a lot of angles that we benefit from. I want to thank Philip, Dr. Philip. Despite the fact that you just assumed a new role, you are still able to find the time for us. I think he's a clear testament of a people's leadership. Whenever people call you, you always do answer. So thank you, sir. And finally, all the organizers, Mike, the back room, Karachi, everybody. So thank you all. And I wish you all a good day, and we'll keep in touch. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you and good night.
Yeah. Bye-bye.